call.
Mr. Balsamo.
Here.
Mr. Battaglia.
Here.
Mrs. Danchek Martin.
Here.
Dr. Delia.
Here.
Mr. Fraginels.
Here.
Mr. Kaczynski. Mrs. Quirk.
Here.
Mr. Scotty.
Here.
Mr. Ferraro.
Here. Any correspondence?
None.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to our public audit presentation. Gary Vinci is here with Lurch, Vinci, and Bliss. We're going to be presenting, Gary's going to be presenting the annual audit for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2024.
Oh, is this on? Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, everybody. Tonight, before the board is the review of last year's school audit. We provided the board, actually in the audience also is Liz Schick. She's a partner in the firm. She works also on the audit. So Liz and I will be answering any of the questions should the board have any. But there are two reports before the board. One is the annual comprehensive financial report, and the second one actually is the auditor's management report. I think to expedite the discussion tonight, we prepared a summary for the board so it would be easier for you to follow as opposed to going through the various reports and looking at various exhibits and pages in both documents. Just from a financial perspective, obviously 23-24 was a very unique year for the school district. Financially, you did end the year just under $3.4 million in reserves and surplus. Just keep in mind that surplus for a school district is generated really only two ways. When you have your budget adopted, you balance your budget with revenues and appropriations. Any money that you collect greater than what you anticipate as a revenue goes to surplus, and any expense or any balance, I should say, that's left in any expense accounts, that difference goes to surplus. And I think that's very important to understand, because if I went back 1 year prior, the district had $2.2 million of reserves and surplus. Now, of that 2.2, just over $1.2 million was used to balance the 23-24 budget. So in theory, you started with $1 million going into July 23. I think what happened during 23-24, the budget that was presented to the board by the former business administrator for your review and approval did not provide enough resources to meet your operating expenses. And in addition, overestimated revenues that were not realized by the district. For example, the budget included miscellaneous revenues. Most of your most of your revenue comes from the state or property taxes. In addition to that, there were estimates made of about $2.7 million for miscellaneous revenues. The district only collected about $700,000. So that revenue shortfall created a direct hit to surplus. There were probably 4 major budget accounts that the original budget was just insufficient for your expenses. For example, your tuition that you pay for special education, like a lot of districts in the state of New Jersey, has escalated annually. The budget provided only $6.6 million, but you did spend 7.6. That is a systemic problem with a lot of districts. A lot of tuition contracts escalated 10% or greater. And unfortunately, that $1 million variance again affected your reserves. The transportation was also impacted because of special education. In addition to tuition, you have to transport the students, and the budget provided to you for your approval was only $2.2 million, but in reality, you spent 2.7. Health insurance was another item that the budget did not have enough resources. The budget was estimated at 11.7. At year end, you incurred $14.7 million of expenses. The maintenance budget was about $700,000 too low. And unfortunately, I think as you review a budget, you're basing it on information from the administrator. And I didn't see how some of the dollar amounts were sufficient for your operating needs. When you factor then in the expenses that exceeded the budget, that was about 5.2 million, the revenue shortfall of 2 million, in theory, the district had over $7 million of an operating deficit. Thus, the need for the advanced state aid of $9 million. And that is really what helped the district, one, for cash flow, and two, to provide some resources for future years for you to build off of. So the state loan, or the state advance, I should say, as you are, I think, well aware, is a 10-year payback. There's $900,000 that will be built into the next 10 years budget. And there are more districts that are experiencing financial difficulties. There are quite a few that were cut state aid, and there's probably about 25 or 30 districts, in addition to those that had already received the state aid advance, that are being impacted currently. Any questions on any of the finances before I then go into the audit comments?
No, Mr. Vinci, the only thing is, if you could just discuss or just go over the fact that these revenue shortfalls resulted in the district having to, the expenses were incurred and were satisfied once we had the state aid, correct?
Right, so the infusion of the state aid eliminated the revenue shortfall and the budget over expenditures. So the revenue infusion of $9 million took care of the 7.5 million operating deficit. That's why the surplus and reserves went from 2.2 really to $3.4 million. So you had extra money built in, and that was also necessary for cash flow. You needed more money than what the operating deficit was estimated to be. Some of the state aid, if you remember, comes in the summertime. You have to pay all your employees by June 30th. So there was a need to ask for additional monies over and above the operating deficit.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Just for discussion regarding the findings, I think that is in the summary that we provided. Some of the findings cover the fact that some documentation was just not provided. Doesn't mean it was not submitted, but it's just the fact that we did not have documentation. For example, the first finding dealt with, it's a report that goes to the Department of Education regarding your health insurance plan. It's a fairly new document, maybe about 3-4 years old. That document just was not available for us. It's an annual submission, and it is required to be submitted in the springtime, I believe. So there will be a new report that will be required early 2025. The payroll agency ledger, there are various ledgers. That ledger summarizes all your payroll taxes. It's obviously very important that the ledger be reconciled with the cash in the bank account. That's a finding that we have had in the last couple of years' reports. Account coding, we touch on, or we audit how some of the expenses are being posted And obviously with the state, there is a chart of accounts that needs to be followed. We did see situations where certain budget expenses were just not coded in compliance with the state manual. We noticed some of the sub-accounts that are in the state budget document when they are then, for the original budget, when they are entered into the internal budget accounting records, some of the accounts were combined. Total budget was accurate. It's just the fact that with some sub-accounts, those sub-accounts need to be isolated and be in agreement with the state budget document. The next finding we touched on, we talked about the deficit, the revenue shortfalls. Again, that's something that will need to be monitored, obviously, on a monthly basis. Capital projects, which is separate from your operating account. The last few years, the district has withdrawn money from your capital reserve, and those monies were used for example, the Oval project. They were used for the high school media center, as well as the Anticore security doors. Those last two projects, the media center and the security, were overexpended. Some of those costs have escalated from the time the original budget was established for those. But there are some monies left in other projects that can be used to offset those over expenditures. With regarding to debt service, the total debt service that was budgeted was sufficient to pay down your bonds and interest. However, the allocation of the budget between principal and interest did not agree with the debt amortization schedule. So one account had a balance, the other account had an over expenditure. And the reason behind that, the district refinanced their bonds a couple years ago, and I believe the incorrect amortization schedule was used by the former administrator. We had an employee that was reimbursed for mileage and other miscellaneous items. Again, that documentation was just not attached to the voucher for which the payment was made against. With the local public contract law, the procurement areas, bidding, state contracts, cooperative purchasing, quotes, there are strict guidelines that need to be followed. Again, what we ran into is that we were unable to be provided some documents as to how certain vendors were selected, whether they were a state contract, whether they were part of a co-op, or whether you publicly bid it. Unfortunately, without the documentation, we couldn't validate or confirm the terms of the contract with how those contracts were originally entered. State contracts and cooperative purchasing has become an issue with quite a few districts. For example, with state contracts, the state will enter into an agreement with a vendor. You can piggyback that contract. That contract is on the state website for 1 year, the terms of which are on the state website. If you do not print that documentation at the time you award the contract, that document will not be available beyond the 1 year contract, will not be able to be retrieved any other way. Cooperative purchasing is very similar. Cooperative purchasing, you have a cooperative business that will bid for those services. You use that contract. The terms that that vendor bid is located with the cooperative purchasing area. The document that they provide, or they need to provide each district, not just Nutley, but every district that uses them, the price list. So that way, when you're billed for that service, you have a document to compare the pricing to. Some of those documents were just not available. The required political contribution disclosure form, business registration forms, not all the documents were available. National co-ops, I think we have talked about this in the past. There are, again, state guidelines that need to be followed. And it's very important because you're now dealing with a vendor outside of the state of New Jersey, and you have to make sure that they follow what you need to follow in the state of New Jersey. We had one recommendation with the extended day program. There are costs being charged to the extended day program, and a cost analysis is very important to just have as a document so that if you are allocating overhead, which you're perfectly allowed to do, there is a rationale behind it. We had one situation with a student activity account. There was a savings account that was within the district for several years. The account was closed out. The money was transferred to the general fund to offset the costs of improving the weight room at the high school. We just didn't have any approval documents to support that. There is a annual application for state school aid that needs to be filed. It was just actually filed mid-October. And we reviewed the October of 23 application, and we noticed differences between what was on the application as compared to some of the internal documents that you have here. That application is really not used for state aid, but yet though that application still has to agree with your internal record keeping. And the last item dealt with the capital asset reporting system. Our recommendation is that it be integrated with your budget accounting system. That way you're tracking it on a current basis, as opposed to utilizing an outside vendor. If you use an outside vendor, you have to make sure their information and their report is accurate. So again, it's just something for consideration to integrate that with your accounting systems.
Thank you, Mr.
Questions?
Vinci.
You're welcome.
Mr. DeVita, anything on your end you'd like to add?
Nope.
Okay. Well, we're going to open it up to any questions that any board members may have, and then we'll open it up to the public for questions. So we'll go around. Any questions from any board members?
Mr. President, more of a comment that during a committee meeting, an academic I can speak for, this was comprehensively reviewed. And as a committee, we did ask many questions and were answered. So just personally speaking, my silence is because I've had all these questions answered before, which were more logistical. Ms. Makis did a wonderful job of walking us through. Mr. DeVita presented the corrective action plan. So my silence is just an affirmation of that moving forward, there are accountable measures in place. So.
Thank you, Mr. DeVita. Okay, we'll open up any questions that the public may have with regard to the annual audit. Anybody has any questions, they can come up. Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to, thank you, Mr. Vinci.
Thank you. You're welcome.
You have a question? Okay, you can give them up. And the question is with regard to the audit, and we have Gary here and Liz from our auditing firm, so they'll be able to hopefully answer your question.
Hi, Carla Curcio, 499 Center Street. So And just listening to, the audit report, and I'm not a finance person. So I guess my first question is, hearing some of these things about, I guess, missing papers and the one example, a student account being transferred to a general account. So what happens now between the BOE and the firm that did the audit? What are the next steps? And how do we, as a community, the Board of Ed, parents, how do we put in some kind of process to hopefully hope that these things don't happen again?
So tonight, and Mr. Vinci, I'm not gonna have you come up yet, but Mr. DeVito, if you want to talk about the corrective action plan, but we are going to be approving a corrective action plan tonight
Oh,
that will
okay.
address some of these, most of these issues with regard to some procedures in place. But we also have, with us Jeanette Makis, who's there as well, overseeing this process, so making sure that all of these processes are in place. But that's one of the agenda items tonight, is we're going to be approving a corrective action plan based
Okay.
on these findings from our auditing firm.
Okay.
And Mr. DeVita, would you like to discuss more about that?
Sure. Yeah, the corrective action plan is actually on our website as one of the attachments. So it's basically a form from the state that we have to put down what all of the findings are from the auditor that he just reviewed. I think there was 13 of them. So we put them down. Then we have to say what we're going to do to fix them, who's going to be fixing them, and then a time frame for when it's going to be completed. So, I mean, over the course of the year, we're doing that. The auditors, come in sometimes. They're most likely going to be doing a review, a projection for us in January. So we're in constant contact with them. Myself, the state monitor, we review the accounts constantly. And then at the end of the school year again, then the auditors will come back again and do another review. So then they'll look at all the findings that we had, then make sure that those are all fixed, and then they'll do their general review of everything again, and then just see if there's any other areas that we need to improve upon.
Okay. And then, thank you. I appreciate that. And then just to kind of tag on to that. So as far as some of the things that were found out during the audit, and again, I'm not a finance person, so I kind of default to the people that know more about these things. In my mind, when I hear that a business administrator took, and correct me if I'm paraphrasing it wrong, like there was money in a student account. I don't know what happened with that student, but how I guess, what is the responsibility on the person that literally took that money from a student account, moved it to a general account, and fixed the gym in the high school? Like, that just seems that shouldn't be going on in my mind. I mean, I could be wrong, but that just doesn't seem, like on the up and up.
Gary, go ahead. You like to comment on that?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Yes, so maybe I could just shed some light on that. So for years, there was a savings account at the high school. And I think that account's been there for longer than 10 years, basically earning interest. I can't answer why the money was withdrawn. So if the account was there, and it basically was a dormant account, I'm not sure if the high school principal signed off on it. We just didn't have any document that said that that was a proper transfer to offset the costs for the weight room. But it was not a active sport, or active club, or activity. It was basically a dormant bank account that had 42,000 plus in the account.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I guess what would be the next steps? Obviously, we're just hearing this, but from all of your experiences, because again, I default to you guys, I don't know the depths and the levels, but what would happen? Like, oh, this account shows up to $42,000 and boom, the weight room gets fixed. Like, I mean, look at, just for me, like I'm, one parent, one taxpayer, like that sounds a little, shady in my opinion. Again, I could be wrong, but what happens at this point? What do we do? Like, is there going to be responsibility put somewhere, or what happens if that person comes back and they're like, oh, where's my $42,000? You know?
So I think that, again, Mr. Vinci discussed the fact that he didn't see any documents. Our understanding was that that was a donation for the rate room. Now, I'm not, 100% exact on all of the, but the money was expended on the weight room. It's not like the money was taken and the money disappeared.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was just understanding that it was like a dormant account, like it was a student account, then it was moved to a general funding account. So does
Yeah, if I-
student, oh, go ahead.
Uh,
I just
I'll
want to make
talk
sure I
about, like,
understand it the right way because I may be misunderstanding it.
yeah, like the student accounts. Say we
Mhm.
have, say there's $200,000 in like the high school student account. There's all like sub accounts that make up that $200,000. So every class will have, like the graduating class this year, they'll
Okay.
have their money in there. Any clubs, art club, drama club, they'll have their money in there. A lot of times, if you have like old graduating classes, they might keep the money in there. So then, as you go on here, that money is always reconciled every month, um, to match everything up to make sure we know where everything is. And then, I wasn't here at the time, so I can't speak of what it kind of came from. But I mean, it was probably just one of the sub accounts of something that's been in there for, as the auditor said, about at least 10 years. So the money was just in there, and then it was used for that. So it wasn't like an active, like the senior class didn't lose that money, or the junior class. It was more in a sub account that wasn't used for a long time.
Okay, so it's more like probably leftover money from other classes that maybe left and didn't want the money.
It's possible it could
It's
be
possible,
latter.
like maybe they just said, "Oh, we're just gonna like donate it," but there's no real tracking of it. Like we don't 100% know technically, like because there's no documentation. Correct? Am I correct in saying that?
Well, there's no documentation on the approval process, because
Okay.
normally anytime a district purchases something or does a
There's
money
an-
transfer,
okay,
the
yeah.
board always has to approve that. So that was never brought forward to the board.
Okay, and then I guess is there anything else that so is aside from all the changes that are going to be made, any other findings? Like, has there been anything found out as far as any potential um, criminal activity? Because I mean, that was a large concern in the beginning when everyone found out about this in town, and look, I don't, I'm not saying that there was, but it was on my mind, and I'm sure it's on a lot of other people's minds. Like, is there anything being found that may potentially lead to something like that at some point, or can you not talk about it?
So I think Ms. Makis wanted to make a comment.
There are some things that we can't talk about,
Mhm.
very honestly. I've been in contact with the state of New Jersey about having a forensic audit done, which would sort out if anything occurred, from our ability to look into it. Um, there were things that I don't know that I don't think they were criminal. I think that they just shouldn't have happened. Uh, the state is waiting for this. We weren't eligible based on last year's audit. The state
Okay.
is waiting for our audit this year to see whether or not we qualify for the forensic audit. If in fact we don't qualify for the state to come in and do the audit, then it is going to be my recommendation that we then hire our own forensic audit to go in and so that we can satisfy you and the other people who live in Nutley and send their children to our schools that there were no such matters. I'll be honest, I don't have the in-depth knowledge that would be required for something like that. I can look on the surface and say I think we could have done this differently. But it is going to happen I'm hoping the state will pay for it, to be perfectly honest with you.
That was my next question, obviously, like, we can't
But
even afford
if
that.
they don't and we have to do it ourselves,
Yeah.
then yes, it will be a cost to the board. But I think it would be a cost well spent.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and answering my questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay. You know, when I said if anybody had any questions before, nobody got up, so that's why.
Sorry, Sal. I know. No, sorry. She just popped a few questions into my mind. Nicholas Frey, 66 North Spring Garden Ave. Just looking through the corrective action plan, it's a lot more thorough than last year's. I know last year's was kind of surface level of things that needed to be implemented. This year, we're implementing them. So it's good to see that there's progress in the direction that we should go. I know that Ms. Makis and Mr. DeVita, your time here has been short, so it looks like you have a direction of what things are going to look like from here on out. But looking back, there are things that I'm sorry,
Gary Vinci.
Mr. Vinci has pointed out. My question is for the auditors: were some of these things that had been recurring in the past that had or had not been brought up?
Yes, Mr. Vinci.
Yes, this audit does have some repeat recommendations, and they are noted accordingly in the management report that the board has and that will be on the board's website. So there are some repeats, yes.
Yep. And are some of these things that that have been brought up and not fixed, or are there things that you had noticed in prior audits that may or may not have been mentioned that are now in this one? Because this one seemed, just looking through the last page of the audits and suggestions, recommendations, there seems to be a larger list than prior years.
So some of the items that were in the last, even if you went back 2 years, some of the items are still in this year's report as a recommendation. There are new findings, and that's very common with any audit. I think when you look at some of the recommendations and findings, there were definitely more because of the lack of documents that we had to satisfy certain compliance issues. And that definitely dealt with purchasing, and we definitely had recommendations in the past, probably more this year, only because of the lack of documents that we were able to have as part of the audit. And now, whether that was because of the timing of when the former administrator left and where some of these documents were, we just couldn't, we didn't have any documents, obviously, to satisfy our requests.
And just, sorry, these are gap compliance? Is that what you're, or just compliance and in general, state, okay. And then with just looking through the past couple of years, some of the revenue to expenses, it seemed to have been snowballing. That where 2020 was a little bit, and then so on and so forth, and then we got to our 9 million. This is the most amount, if I'm not mistaken. The 9 million is the most amount, where it was last year higher. I don't quite remember. Last year was about 6 to 7. So I guess my overall question is, if last year's was a $6 million differential in the red, and now we're up to 9 million in the red, I understand health insurance is a part of it. I understand that special education is a part of it. But was there were there major cracks that you had seen in 22, 23 to now 24 that may not have been brought up? What's that? Sure. Yeah. I'm just wondering if there were cracks in that may have slipped through due to lack of documentation, due to whatever those issues were.
Is that a question for the board or for Mr. Vinci?
Whoever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Mr. Vinci, if you want to come up and answer it.
So if we went back to 22-23 school year, just looking at maybe certain accounts, the reserves of the board and surplus did go down. It went down from, I believe, 9 million down to 2.2. And there were issues that we noticed as part of the 22-23 audit that caused that decline. What has happened here, and I think what has happened in quite a few districts, the way the tax cap law is working with school districts, all districts have a cap as to how much they can increase their property taxes. You have a budget that's balanced by property taxes, state aid, or other resources that you collect locally. What has happened, if you went back 4 years ago, there's a state aid that comes in that is not known at the time you adopt your budget. That is extraordinary aid, and that's a reimbursement the state gives all the districts for individuals that have a very high, I think they use $40,000 as a threshold for tuition placements. So there is a mechanism that the DOE will calculate the reimbursements to all districts throughout the state, probably in the spring. So you probably find out maybe in May or June. I don't think you know that prior to that point in time. So a lot of districts, what they did a few years ago, they never anticipated that revenue. So whatever you collected theoretically went to surplus. What has happened the last couple of years, and I think it's probably the pressure to balance the budget, to meet the tax cap, certain revenues were estimated, extraordinary aid 2 years ago, 3 years ago was not estimated, to the point that in the 23-24 budget, $2.4 million was estimated and you collected 2.8. But by estimating the 2.4, you actually lose the ability to generate surplus from that type of aid. That type of budgeting is happening in a lot of districts because they can't meet the 2% cap. So if you have a 2% tax increase, if you have expenses, for example, as I mentioned, your tuition contracts, as well as most districts, are going up more than 10% per contract. Your health insurance, we all know the issue with health premiums, whether you are self-insured or whether you are with the state. They're going up double digits. We know the fact that labor agreements are greater than 2%. So it is becoming more and more challenging for school districts to meet the 2% unless you decide to go to the voters and ask for a separate ballot question to increase the funding that is needed for your operating needs. Miscellaneous revenues this year was budgeted at $2.7 million. That's never been estimated that high. 2 years ago, 800,000 was estimated. So it's obviously how the administrator budgeted in 23-24, I think created some of the financial problems that you're now dealing with. But there have been budget accounts that have been estimated greater to realization or just overestimated. And I think that's what caused the revenue shortfall, definitely in 23-24.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frey. Okay, we're going to, okay, I'm going to move on. Can I get a motion for approval of the minutes? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay. We're going to also now go to our reports, our superintendent report, Mr. Bania.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, members of the board, faculty, staff, parents, and community members. As we're concluding the calendar year, I am proud to highlight the recent achievements of our district and share updates on the exciting events we can look forward to in the coming year. This December, our schools have been alive with the joyful sounds of music and the creative talents of our students. Our Nutley High School Yuletide concert showcased the incredible talents of our high school instrumentalists and vocalists with performances that capture the magic of the holiday season. And the St. Mary's Benefit Concert brought the Nutley community together for a wonderful evening of music and giving, supporting local charitable efforts and underscoring the power of music to inspire and unite. And our Holiday Music Boutique, supported by our music boosters this past month, was a festive event offering unique handmade crafts and performances by students, further highlighting the connection between creativity and community spirit. We are proud of our students, teachers, and their families for their commitment to the arts, which enriches our schools and the broader Nutley community. Our school counselors are celebrating early successes in the college admission process. We are thrilled to report that Nutley students have already begun receiving acceptances from some of the most prestigious institutions in the country. A special congratulations goes out to Josiah DePaz, who has been admitted to Brown University. This is a tremendous accomplishment, and we are incredibly proud of Josiah and all of our students who continue to work hard to achieve their dreams. Looking ahead to January, our counseling office has several important planned events. Parents of 8th grade students will be invited to an informational session, to discuss the transition to Nutley High School. This meeting will provide an overview of academic offerings, extracurricular opportunities, and support systems available for incoming freshmen. Counselors will meet with high school students to discuss course selections for next year, ensuring students are informed and prepared to make decisions that align with their academic goals and interests. Additionally, Nutley High School was recently recognized by the College Board as a member of the AP Honor Roll. This commendation acknowledges our commitment to expanding access to advanced placement courses, enabling more students to challenge themselves academically and prepare for colleges. As we prepare for next year, there are many exciting events and initiatives to anticipate. The district will participate in the spelling bee again. January will feature our annual spelling bee, where students from across the district will demonstrate their linguistic skills and determination. Thank you to the NEF for supporting this initiative again. We also are looking forward to our high school musical, Mean Girls Junior. Nutley High School will take the stage this spring with their production of Mean Girls Junior, promising a dynamic and entertaining performance by our talented students. This new year will bring opportunities for our community to collaborate on shaping the future of Nutley Public Schools through strategic planning, and we will chart a path for our continued growth and success. And our student athletes are gearing up for an exciting winter season. There's a basketball game tonight with basketball, wrestling, indoor track, and more. As spring approaches, we look forward to baseball, softball, track and field, and other sports, continuing our tradition of excellence. It is with a heavy heart that we acknowledge the recent tragedy of Abundant Life Christian School in Madison, Wisconsin, where a teacher and a student have lost their lives. Our thoughts and prayers are with the victims, their families, and the Madison community during this unimaginable time. Tragic events like this remind us of the importance of prioritizing safety in our schools. The Nutley Public Schools remain steadfast in our commitment to maintaining a secure and supportive learning environment. We continue to review our safety protocols, conduct drills, and provide resources to support the well-being of our students and staff. As December concludes, we celebrate, it's also with deep sadness that we acknowledge the passing of Dr. Bob Topolsky, aged 76, of Barnegat, New Jersey, who passed suddenly on December 2nd. Dr. Topolsky was a dedicated educator who took great pride in his work with individuals and disabilities. He was a big part of Nutley High School and Nutley Special Services for a long period of time, about 20 years. Now, we extend our heartfelt condolences to his family, friends, and all who were touched by his dedication and kindness. And as December concludes, we celebrate the distinguished career of Mrs. Dorothy Despodo, our Special Services Secretary, who is retiring after many years of exceptional service. Dorothy's professionalism, dedication, and compassion have left a mark on our district. On behalf of the Nutley Public Schools, we extend our heartfelt gratitude and best wishes for her in retirement. Finally, I would like to thank our students at Spring Garden School for their handwritten holiday cards to myself and the Board of Education. We gave them tonight to them. They are perfect, and in speaking For the board, we are thankful for our faculty, staff, and students, families, and community, not only from Spring Garden, but from all of our schools, for your continued dedication to the district. Your collaboration and support ensure that Nutley remains a district of excellence. I wish everyone a Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, a joyous Kwanzaa, and a peaceful and prosperous New Year. May this season bring happiness and warmth to all who celebrate. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Banya. Mr. Vinci, you can leave if you have somewhere else to be. Thank you. Mr. DeVita, our business administrator report.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to go over a couple items that are on my report. We'll be approving amendments to both the IDA and the ESEA grants. This is because we received approval of our final expenditure reports for the 2023-24 school year, and we did have some carryover funds that must be expended in the 24-25 school year. So we're just amending the grants and submitting them with those new amounts. Then we're also approving the submission of a district improvement plan. This is needed because the district score with the QSEC monitoring visit that we had last school year was below the 80% in the fiscal area. So the improvement plan covers the non-compliant indicators, and the plan will now be submitted to the state for their review. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeVita. Ms. Makis?
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the mayor and commissioners of the Township of Nutley. I attend monthly monitor meetings at the state level, and I can tell you that the amount of cooperation that I've received in Nutley from your township commissioners and the mayor does not exist in other districts who have state monitors. There has been open communication. They have entered into savings and improved services through shared service agreements that have improved our services and saved us money. And the cooperation between the township government and the Board of Education is truly more unusual than common and what happens in other districts. So I really wanted to share that with you because I think it is important as part of the One Nutley that it's in place and that it is working, and that as an outsider looking in, I am totally impressed every time there is an interaction between the board and the commissioners and the mayor. It is on a positive level, and it has certainly helped the district get through some of the things that have occurred as a result of 22, 23, 24. In terms of where we are as a district, I know there were comments about what we are doing. I can tell you that we have established many procedures that have been put in place that have checks and balances that prevent over expenditures, not only in fiscal year 24-25, but in future years. There's no such thing as overriding accounts. Forms are in place to request transfer of funds. Funds must be transferred prior to a purchase being approved, as well as a review of the accounts total report, which is done on a weekly basis, and sometimes during the year on a daily basis. The agenda, there is now additional information on the agenda, including account codes, which ensures that the costs are charged to the appropriate accounts, particularly salary accounts. When services and salaries are properly charged, very honestly, forecasting and budgeting become much more accurate. And that's our goal, is to create accuracy for this year, as well as going forward, that what's in place continues. The monthly bills list contains explanations, making it easier for you, the public, and the board to ascertain what expenditures were included on the invoice. Contracts such as out-of-district placements, transportation, etc., are encumbered in full upon board approval. Encumbered means that purchase orders are put in place to reserve the funds for the entire length of the contract. This was not done last year. Monies were encumbered on a monthly basis, which led to some of the recommendations that were included within the audit. That is not happening this year. We are ensuring that as funds are required, they are in fact encumbered. Home instruction, this was a problem last year. I know Mr. Banya has been working with the appropriate people to ensure that the services that are required for our students are approved at the board level monthly. This gives us a clear picture of anticipated costs and allows us to transfer funds if necessary during the course of the year. And hopefully it will prevent surprises as occurred this past July and August, when we were receiving invoices for services that had been performed in January and February. Our goal is to ensure that what we expend today is in fact encumbered and paid appropriately, and that we don't end up with surprises that we don't know about at the end of the year. Purchasing, the district is getting quotes and or purchasing through approved cooperatives as required by law. This, as you heard, was a major finding in the current audit. And the result is that without proper either bidding, using a cooperative, or a state contract, you can't be sure that you're getting the best price possible for the services or that have to be provided. The resolutions now include all of the information required by law, and if it's appropriate, that the information is advertised in the paper, because in some cases, certain things need to be advertised. That was another situation that we couldn't find happened last year. Board secretary and treasury reports are submitted to the board in a timely manner as required by law, and proper certifications are being made with regard to the budget and account balances and sufficient funds. Payroll, after every payroll, projections are done and transfers are made if necessary to ensure that the salary accounts have sufficient funds. Between January and June, we will be working on the account codes themselves as described in the audit to be sure that they match the state's chart of accounts, which is very specific, and that the salaries are budgeted in the appropriate accounts in fiscal year 25-26. Again, that assists with future budgeting. Health and property insurance. The board did request for proposals for an insurance broker, reviewed 6 or 7 forms, reduced it to 3 for a second round of interviews, and approved IMAC as the district's broker. The board is getting comprehensive monthly reports that shows the status of our claims, in-network usage, prescriptions, and trends. This allows us to track the costs in relationship to our budget. A meeting was held with the JIF, which through which we fund our property and our workers' comp claims. We reviewed our ratings, and we're going to work with them to ensure that we benefit from any available training and services that they can give us with regard to coming in and looking at our buildings and the way we operate. Budget fiscal year 25-26. Mr. Banya and Mr. DeVita have begun the budget process. We have been advised by the state to plan for a cut in state aid. A cut in state aid is going to make budgeting for next year very difficult. And very tough decisions are going to probably have to be made. But this is going to be a situation that doesn't only exist in Nutley. This is going to be a difficult situation for the majority of districts in the state of New Jersey. My hope is that we're minimally flat, so we don't lose any state aid, but that's not the indication we're being given. Projections, we have requested that the auditor come in January to do projections for us through the end of the year. Very honestly, I want to confirm what I'm seeing, that we are going to end the 24-25 school year with a balanced budget. Everybody is truly working hard towards that goal. Again, it will give us the information we need to make any changes as quickly as possible to avoid what happened in 23-24. And then finally, it would be remiss if I didn't thank Mr. Battaglia, who was on the Finance Committee, and the advice and the history that he has, his commitment to the Nutley School District and the education of your students, and the fact that he was someone who would argue with me. And very honestly, on occasion, I did win the argument. I can't say that happened often. And he would remind me that we needed because my favorite term is we need to set up procedures, because if you have procedures, everybody knows what they're supposed to do. See, he would indicate to me very often that perhaps we needed a procedure to meet a goal. It has truly been a pleasure, and I look forward to being able to contact him every so often when I feel that I need to argue with someone. But Joe, I thank you very much for the assistance you've given me in a very short period of time. And I've learned a lot about Nutley, and I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mrs. Makis. I don't see our student representative here tonight, so we're going to move on to committee reports. Ms. Dancheck Martin, academic, please.
Yes, Mr. President. The Academic Committee met on December 10th at 5:30 p.m. in the BOE conference room. Mr. DeVita discussed with the committee the findings from the 23-24 audit and reviewed the correction action plan with us. Mr. DeVita and Ms. Makis answered questions that the committee had regarding the audit and business office related matters. Ms. Loconsolo shared with the committee a grant awarded to a music teacher at Spring Garden for instructional resources. Ms. Loconsolo shared with the committee resources and planning around artificial intelligence professional development. She also alerted the committee to the Nutley High School Program of Studies draft available for review. Mr. Banya and Ms. Loconsolo discussed a few areas that were still under development for the 25-26 school year. Mr. Banya discussed matters related to special services, long-range planning, and legal matters. And Ms. Loconsolo reviewed field trip and professional development requests. Our next academic committee will be determined to following the reorganization of the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dancheck Martin. Mr. Kaczynski, administration.
December 10th, I'm sorry. Mr. DeVita discussed the committee, the findings from the 23-24 audit, which we heard tonight. Mr. Bain discussed property acquisition and long-range facility planning. Mr. Bain Mr. Banya discussed the request proposal for a strategic plan consultant and provide the committee with a legal update. Our next plan administration committee will be after the reorganization meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Kaczynski. Mr. Fraginos, our finance.
Thank you, Mr. President. Finance Committee met on December 13th. In attendance was Ms. Battaglia, myself, Ms. Makis, Mr. Banya, and Mr. DeVita. Finance resolutions were discussed, including grant amendments for the IDEA and the ESEA grants due to carryover balances remaining from the 2023 and 2024 year. Approving the audit and corrective action plan and the district improvement plan that is needed because of the low fiscal score during the CUSAC review last year. Corrective action plan was reviewed with other committees. The costs with negotiations of the Nutley Administrators Associations were discussed. We discussed benefits and looked at participation rates and costs, went over legal updates, discussed the payback amounts of the state loan, and discussed getting the budgeted amount spent on technology for the technology committee.
Thank you, Mr. Fraginos. We now come to the portion of our meeting where we allow members of the public to address the board. In this section, we allow questions or comments on reports, resolutions, and all school-related matters. Our board regulations number 0167 allot 20 minutes for these communications. Each person shall be limited to 3 minutes, and we ask you try to stay within this requirement. Speakers may speak more than once, only after all others wishing to speak on a topic have been heard. All statements will be directed to me as the chairperson, and no one may address board members individually. Please be reminded that if your statement is too lengthy, abusive, obscene, irrelevant, or redundant, your participation may be terminated. Please remember to state your name and address each and every time you address the board. Does anyone have any questions?
Hi, Janine Delaney, 55 Stager Street, Nutley. Okay. I'm a mom of 4 daughters. I have a daughter in 9th grade. There's been a lot of fights in town, in the classrooms, actually. There was mention of protocols and safety. I'm also a teacher. I hear about these fights. I hear that there's videos of these fights. Are there any measures that protect these teachers? For example, like what happens in the middle of a classroom, there's a fight. Does the teacher have to go in there? Because I think about myself and I think, God, am I going to jump in? These kids are big. I'm like, I'm a little girl.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't imagine those older teachers or the shorter teachers. Are they jumping in? What happens if they get hurt?
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing to address this?
Yeah, so I can't speak to many student matters, but as you're aware, we have seen an uptick in incidents in our high school. Administration is working through many different levels of individual students to groups of students to proactive measures to deal with that. I will say we have security in our high school. We have 2 security individuals, and if needed, we can use other district resources to support the high school if needed, if we see an uptick. I will say that we are reviewing many things from our discipline regulations, being consequences for actions like that, to proactive measures in our high school. Just today, I sat with the principal for a good amount of time talking through what this looks like. So we are aware of this uptick. We are using many of the resources we have at our disposal, consequences, mental health supports.
But is there like a protocol? So like there's a fight breaking out. You're the teacher.
Yeah.
What do they do? Do
Yeah.
they know what they're supposed to do?
Yeah, we have a security manual that outlines what they should be doing in that
Are they
situation.
aware of what they're supposed to do?
Yes.
Because I'm getting feedback from like my daughter's friends who are in classes, and I asked them, I'm like, what are your teachers doing? Because I don't know what I would do.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing they're having panic attacks, they're screaming, they're running out to get help. To me, that's a little frightening.
Right.
I have 4 daughters that are going to be going through. I have one in 9th grade, one coming up to the high school next year. I'm a little afraid. I don't want my daughters to come into a school and get hurt because maybe they're walking by to get to their class and these girls and children are fighting, like physically fighting. I went to school here. This didn't happen in the 90s. I don't know where we're going, but it's absolutely crazy. I can't, and they're videoing it.
Mhm.
That's another thing. The phones, are we getting them out of the classrooms? What's the procedure and protocol for each class? I'm hearing burner phones are used to put in the little thing.
Yeah. If you're an educator, you understand this is a systemic problem in all schools, and we're dealing with this through many measures. But to answer your questions directly, yes, we have a security manual that goes through what teachers should do. Yes, we have security in place to deal with this. Yes, our administration are acutely aware of what's going on in our high school and are working through various strategies to do that, including the cell phone usage.
The kids have their phones during the day. They're texting during class time. The teachers are not following that protocol. How is that protocol going to be followed? You know, the Snapchat and all the social media, it's out of control. How are we managing it? What procedures are in place? What are those procedures? Are they being followed? Who's making sure they're being followed?
Right. You've asked me a lot of questions in a
Sorry,
short amount of
I'm
time.
just-
Let me try and answer
I
a
get
couple of them for
nervous
you.
because this wasn't the town I grew up in.
Yeah,
And
I
when
know.
I hear these things, I cry.
I would agree. I went to school
I'm
in
a
the 90s
teacher
as
and I
well,
just-
and it looks different now than it did in the 90s, so I totally agree with you. But I will say we've tried many strategies with cell phones, including checking them in, doing different things. I can't speak to every single one of them our high school team has tried throughout the time. I know from the School Boards Association to state U.S. Department of Education, there's a movement to remove cell phones from schools. I know some districts are moving to that. We'll bring that forward when we can to talk about that here in Nutley. But as of right now, our administration is acutely aware of what's going on. Specifically, in the last week at the high school, we are dealing with this with every mechanism we have at our disposal. I do appreciate your feedback and your
It's
comments.
also frightening to hear Ms. Makis say that cuts are coming. So I'm sure this is just going to get worse.
Yeah.
We need a strong support system for our teachers and support staff.
Yeah.
It's not fair for these teachers to feel this way. They're already under a lot of pressure with the budget cuts.
I would
So
agree.
it's just something to think about moving forward.
Thank you for your feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Can we just, Ian, can you make the speakers louder? Because it's very difficult for me, especially, to hear the questions.
Hi, I'm Cindy Schwartz, 461 Center Street, Nutley. I have two questions. How many armed guards are walking the floors?
Yeah, I'm just going to chime in as the lawyer on this one. We really shouldn't divulge publicly security measures and things. There are armed guards, but in terms of security plans, I think it compromises our security to identify exact numbers of things, locations. So I would say that the board can't answer that one.
Okay. Question number two. I have a daughter. I don't like the way she dresses sometimes, but we're in different ages. What is the school doing? Because I know I don't get no phone calls, and the friends' moms don't get phone calls. Why are these children allowed to go inappropriately dressed to school without a parent being called to come pick their child up?
Okay, Mr. Banya?
Yeah, we have a dress code policy that our administration follows, and I don't know the specific instance you're talking about, but I do know that they do follow that, and there are discipline matters for students that do not dress appropriately in school.
It's for the high school? I pick up, drop off?
For all of our schools, yeah.
Well, I'm talking just for high school,
Okay.
because the high schools are pretty well developed than they were when we were in school. Why? I'm seeing them coming and going in very inappropriate outfits.
I would say if there's something specific regarding a matter, we can talk with the high school administration. I'd be happy to be involved as well. But specifically, if there's a matter that you want to talk through, we can do that following this meeting or another time.
No, I just want to see everybody protected. Sometimes girls don't know they shouldn't show things, and that's how things happen. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hi, my name is Kim Van Wert, 34 Ivy Place. Two different things in completely different categories. One, when does the bid come out for food services? So we're able to read that to see what's going out to companies for the new year, for next year?
Yeah, that process will probably start around around February, March or so. We'll start that, and then somebody will be awarded for the following school year.
Great. And then the second thing, along with what Ms. Minka said in regards to cuts, is there some sort of caliber being reached in regards to, especially in the elementary schools, the number of higher HIB reports, and also just going off of the information from the high school, but on the elementary school level of just how many more unfortunate accidents or activities are happening with disciplinary measures, bullying. HIB is very specific, so the kid can not see anything and punish somebody, and then there's no punishment or very lack of suspension doesn't happen, versus them using the protected words, and then it's a whole other issue. So being in a school that are things were taken away, behaviorists weren't hired, we have a half person as our guidance counselor, not that she's not doing 19 jobs, but just that we ourselves are there and things are put on hold. Our principal is doing twice as much because of that. So are those being looked at, watched, and those numbers being taken into consideration when we look at the budget for potential cuts?
Yes, we're going to use every data set we have at our disposal, and that's the process we're in, collecting data not only to the projections of salaries, healthcare, some of the things. I'm sorry, Mr. President, I just answered the question.
Absolutely.
I'm supposed to ask for permission but we are also looking at data from our curriculum instruction as well as bullying. Our bullying and our discipline data gets assessed every 6 months by state. Last meeting, I presented our bullying. There's a lag time involved, but we are monitoring. In that report, for example, we identified one of our buildings had an uptick in that cycle, and we've put some things in place internally to deal with what we're seeing. Those reports tell us not only that there's an uptick or a code of conduct uptick, but also what areas the uptick is in. For example, are we having trouble punching, for example, things of that nature. So we are able to do some programming to those issues. We do use a program called Hipster, allows us to track some of this data, disaggregate it at a pretty high level to get that information. But to your point, we are very conscientious of our mental health and our counseling. We know they're overstretched. A lot of our staff and faculty are overstretched, including K-12, central office. Everyone's working very hard in district, and I'd be remiss if I didn't appreciate them right now, especially the counselors at the elementary level and our principals, I think you mentioned.
Yeah.
But I do think we're going to look at that as we develop, this budget coming up.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Before you ask your question, you can come up. I just wanted to, I think it was last year, Mr. Banya, or 2 years ago, that the board updated its code of conduct throughout the whole district. So could you just maybe just explain it to that, everybody a little bit to that?
Sure. For our district goal number 1, we wanted to look at things like dress code, tardiness, as well as our discipline and code of conduct. Last summer, we upgraded or revisited our regulations regarding that. The regulations were brought to the administrative team. We looked through a tiered system of discipline for certain infractions. To the question before, we are revisiting that regulation now to see if some of our consequences, which may not be having effect, can be updated and brought to the board. To do that, requires us understanding the information, us making sure that while we do have an acute thing going on right now in our high school, we look long-term what's best for students. So that work's being done, and we will bring that to the board with recommendations as to how we can modify based on the behaviors we're seeing.
And just from going from what I recall, there was something in there as far as there had to be an acknowledgement on behalf of the student and the parents that there was that they received that code of conduct, that it was acknowledged that at least they received it and read it, correct?
Correct. That's typically done in the beginning of school when we give access to our student information system, the parent portal, the student portal. Correct.
Thank you. Okay, I'm sorry.
Donna Ferraro, 34 Roosevelt Street. My question is, I'm sorry I was late. It is December and I did have plans and I missed the audit presentation. It came in at the end. So to understand that now the state is going to do an audit, is this a continuous or is this the end, what took place tonight?
So, Ms. Makis, the audit report that we just went over tonight, that is the audit report that was done by our auditor. That's what's required every year. Okay, so Ms. Makis will, she discussed before the, I guess what would be the forensic audit. But Ms. Makis,
Okay.
Yes, the auditor, we're required to do it every year. The auditor comes in and hopefully finds nothing, but in this year, of course, there were quite a few. A forensic audit will go into uh, much more detail in terms of they will look to see whether some of the pricing we got that we can't find paperwork for, um, was it done correctly, even though we didn't find it? Were the prices that we got lower? Um, did they, looking at state contracts, they would be able to see, they have access to information that the auditor doesn't have, possibly. They will look into services that were provided, were they actually provided, kind of things. It's a different kind of audit to actually try to determine whether things were done just because of lack of knowledge, inexperience, or whether there may have been other factors involved. And as the state monitor, I feel that that audit is necessary, not because I know anything, but just because of the fact that there were so many missing pieces, as was explained by the auditor, paperwork that couldn't be found. Um, I need to be sure that without the paperwork being found, that things were done in a reasonably legal way. And it's not because I have any knowledge, it's because of the experience I have as a business administrator and having worked in districts and done budgets and gone through audits myself. And that's what a forensic auditor will do. And as I said, I'm hoping the state will do it so we don't have to pay for it. But I feel that to give the community peace of mind, because I know it's still an issue out there. I want the end result to be that mistakes were made, and more importantly for me, because I would ask the forensic auditor to also look at the procedures we've put in place to ensure that something like this does not happen again, which is more important to me. I have told the people in the audience, and I've said to the board, at some point, you have to stop looking backwards and simply look at moving forward. And if you begin to put those procedures in place, and where people are accepting those procedures, and we enforce the procedures, what you end up with is not more money, but what you end up with is the secure knowledge that what is being spent is a very public, the public knows and can see, and you can justify it. If I don't have the paperwork, how do I justify it to you? So it's establishing the files, making sure that every piece of paper, that every purchase order has all the information that's required. So a forensic audit would also look at our procedures that we're putting into place and saying yes, or maybe this is a better way to do it.
Okay, and about how long is that gonna take?
Well, our audit is done. So the first thing we have to do, we're required to submit the audit to the state. Once the state gets, there are certain requirements that you need to have for the state to actually do the audit, do the forensic audit. So once we submit our audit, they will take a look at it and see if we qualify. They will let me know, yes, you qualify, no, you don't. As soon as it's no, you don't, then we'll go with the board paying for the audit. Um, I can only tell you that they have been very responsive. They've given me information along the way. As soon as I know that our audit has been submitted, I will be on the phone with the state to say, can you give me some indication of which direction you're going so that we can do what we have to do here?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have any questions?
Good evening, everyone. Julie Mitchell, 19 Evergreen Avenue. I just have a question, a comment and a question with regard to some points that were brought up tonight with regard to some of the policies and procedures we have in place. So what I'm hearing, and I do love that I'm hearing from Ms. Makis, process and procedure. I'm a big fan as a former teacher and administrator and now educational consultant all across the state. I'm a big fan of process and procedure, but not just having it on paper. So parents brought up tonight some interesting points with regard to security manuals and fights. My daughter also in the high school, another one in the middle school. Yes, kids have changed, behaviors have changed, therefore our policies must change. But not just the policies of what's on paper. Security, dress code, phone policies. These are issues that we're dealing with our students now, right? At all ages. And so what I'm noticing is that there is a big difference between what people should know, right? And do, and what's actually followed with fidelity. So my question, I guess, is if we know that these important points are being brought up tonight with regard to safety and security, dress code, phone policy, which I believe directly impact instruction in the classroom, how are we going to hold everyone in the district accountable? How will that communication happen between what's on paper and what's actually occurring in our classrooms? And will teachers be supported by administration when situations occur, whether it's a dress code violation, whether it's a phone policy violation? Will teachers be supported by administration in their buildings and thus supported by the board to ensure that our students are safe in all aspects of our classrooms?
Yeah, before you answer, I just want to make it clear that this board obviously is very concerned and very supportive of anything that has to do with our student and staff. And that's one of the issues that one of the reasons why I think it was last year, a year and a half ago, we made it a point to look at those policies with code of conduct, because we wanted to make sure that there was the tools available to our staff to be able to do some of the things that they need to do. And our staff can feel safe and secure that we as a board are 100% behind them.
Yeah, I'll start off just piggyback. I've heard in committee meetings the support for policies that empower our staff to work with our students in a productive way to reduce some of the things you're talking about. But to answer your question directly, our administration will support our staff and students, and especially in these difficult, challenging times where they have to break up a fight, they have to remove cell phones, they have to deal with someone who's not dressed appropriately. We will continue to review our policies and regulations as we are now with some of our discipline regulations and make necessary adjustments to deal with the situations that present ourselves. We will listen to the feedback from the public and act accordingly. I have two daughters myself, not in this district, but I do understand exactly what you're talking about and how scary that is. We do not want our teachers or our staff to feel in any danger throughout the day. And I'm well aware of some of the things that are out there with regard to our most recent thing. And we're spending a lot of time working through what could have been done better and debriefing with that situation. So we do accept all feedback. We will go through our process of review and make sure that this is done in an appropriate fashion. Your question was, how do we hold staff members accountable to following through? I remember stemming from last summer, I put out a video actually to our staff, me talking about the expectations for certain things following our policies and procedures. And we'll do that again if necessary, just to remind them that these are the expectations we have in districts. So I think you bring up many great points, Julie. And I do know it's a concern of many parents probably watching or in the audience tonight. And I know Nutley will address these things moving forward.
I do appreciate that. And I think it's such a collective effort that so many new challenges that we're seeing in our students, and it's not just on the teachers, right? Because I'm a huge supporter of our educators. So I believe it's a community effort. It's the parents, it's the teachers, it's the administration, and it's the board, and it's everybody on board with what's on paper, but also ensuring that they're aware of how this looks in the day-to-day when we're in the trenches with the kids. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for your feedback.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, can I have a motion to move on to close the public comment portion? All in favor? Ms. Stanchek Martin, would you move academic?
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to move academic resolutions 1 through 3 as written.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Balsamo,
Yes.
Mr. Battaglia.
Yes.
Mrs. Dancheck Martin. Dr. D'Elia.
Yes.
Mr. Freginals.
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski. Mrs. Quirk. Mr. Scotty. Mr. Ferraro.
Yes. Mr. Kaczynski, Administration?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Balsamo.
Yes.
Mr. Battaglia.
Yes.
Mrs. Dancheck Martin. Dr. D'Elia.
Yes.
Mr. Freginals.
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski. Mrs. Quirk. Mr. Scotty. Mr. Ferraro.
Yes. Mr. Fraginos, Finance?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to move finance resolutions 1 through 14 as written.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Balsamo.
Yes, with abstaining for number 3, check number 219131. Yes, the rest of the way.
Mr. Battaglia.
Yes.
Mrs. Dancheck Martin. Dr. D'Elia.
Yes.
Mr. Freginals.
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski. Mrs. Quirk. Mr. Scotty. Mr. Ferraro.
Yes. Mr. Scotty, Policy?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Balsamo.
Yes.
Mr. Battaglia.
Yes.
Mrs. Dancheck Martin. Dr. D'Elia.
Yes.
Mr. Freginals.
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski. Mrs. Quirk. Mr. Scotty. Mr. Ferraro.
Yes. Mrs. Quirk, Personnel?
Yes, I'd like to move personnel resolutions number 1 is written.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Balsamo.
Yes.
Mr. Battaglia.
Yes.
Mrs. Dancheck Martin. Dr. D'Elia.
Yes, with exception, item 1A3, abstain.
Mr. Freginals.
Yes.
Ms. Kaczynski. Mrs. Quirk. Mr. Scotty. Mr. Ferraro.
Abstain? Any old business to come before the board? Okay, new business. First, I want to apologize to everybody out there. I'm being told that I think it's time for me to get hearing aids because the speakers are bothering me, but nobody else, so I apologize for that. That's what my wife tells me every day, that I do need to get them. So tonight, I want to take a moment to thank someone whose commitment to our school district has been nothing short of extraordinary. And that person is Joseph Battaglia. As I reflect on Joe's contributions over the past 3 years, I also confront the reality that the recent election did not return him to this board. And I want to be clear that this community owes Joe a tremendous debt of gratitude, and his absence will certainly be felt. Serving as a trustee on the Board of Education requires many hours spent in meetings, preparing for discussions, and making decisions that impact the future of our schools. These hours often come at the expense of personal and family time. Joe, you made these sacrifices willingly because you cared deeply about our students, our staff, and the future of this community. You served not for recognition or applause, but because you truly believed in making a difference. This past year, when our district faced a serious financial crisis, Joe was instrumental in helping to identify the problem, navigate its complexities, and find solutions that enabled the district to fulfill its obligations. His steady leadership during such a challenging time was nothing short of remarkable, and his contributions helped steer this district through a moment of great uncertainty. At the same time, Joe faced personal and professional attacks. attacks that were unwarranted and unfair. These criticisms were designed to discredit him, but instead, what they revealed is his resilience and commitment. Despite these challenges, Joe remained focused on doing what was best for our students and our schools. He never wavered in his dedication, choosing to rise above negativity and serve with integrity. On a personal note, I want to express how proud I am to have served alongside Joe. His determination, passion, and his steadfast values have inspired not only me, but everyone fortunate enough to have worked with him. Joe always kept the needs of our students and our districts at the forefront, and his actions set an enduring example of leadership and service. While the election results were not what I had hoped for, they in no way lessen the significant impact Joe has had on this district, and his absence from this board will certainly be felt. Joe, thank you for everything you have done for our schools, our students, and our community. And above all, thank you for your friendship. It has been an honor to serve alongside you, and I know I speak for many when I say you will always have our deepest gratitude. Thank you, Joe.
Mr. President,
Yes, I'm going to open that up to the rest of the board if they'd have anything they'd like to say.
thank you, Mr. President. And I apologize because I'm having a little problem speaking tonight, but I'll try my best. I probably have more of an advantage of most of my board members because I was fortunate enough to serve with Joe's father. And Sam Battaglia was one of my better friends in my life. Besides a good golf partner, he was one of the better board members I've met in my life. I remember him and I served, I think he served one term as president, I was president, and vice president back and forth for 3 times. And Joe was big in his own way. Sam was big in size. But Joe, again, just most of you know that I've served with Abe Lincoln on his board, but in many years I've been on, I've served with cops, others, a lot of teachers, a lot of different professional people. I had never had the privilege of serving with the fiduciary. And thank God I'm not in the finance committee. I never did like it, Sal, thank you. But having Joe there was the best thing for Nutley, even though they didn't realize it. And it's too bad, Joe, you were there at this unfortunate time and you took the blame for what was happening financially in Nutley. Not our fault, certainly not your fault personally. And I know you took it on and you wanted people to make sure you knew what we were talking about, and you did, but they didn't listen to you, Joe. It's a terrible, terrible shame. It's a loss for the Board of Education. Financially, in my opinion, it's a loss for Nutley. But I enjoyed serving with you. I wish I had a lot more years with you, Joe. I love you, your family, your mother. God bless you.
Thank you, Charlie. Anyone else that would?
Yeah, Mr. President. First off, I have prepared words just as long, perhaps longer than yourself. I'm not going to go that long. I do want to say I agree with every word you said. One word missing in there were the lies. Okay? Other than that, I would have written word for word what you did and what you spoke. The people that know me best, they know that when I say something, it's because either I know it or I believe it. I don't speak to flatter, but I've known Joe as long as my son has been in school. But I didn't know Joe until we served together. Working with Joe, I could tell you, as a 46-year-old man, he is probably, if he's not the sharpest, most intelligent person I've met as a professional, he's at least up there with some of the smartest people I've ever met. When my colleagues up here tell you about what a tremendous loss this is going to be for the district, the last 15 months or so, whichever it was, I've learned more about finance. I've learned more about accounting. I've learned more and more and more. And every time I pick up the phone, I learn something else. So, Joe, I want you to know, serving with you has been great. I think Charlie said it the best. It's not the outcome any of us were hoping for or expecting, but I want you to know serving with you has been a pleasure.
Anyone else? Tom?
It's funny is my day job is also a district administrator. And when I say what I'm about to say about Joe, I say it from as a colleague on the board, but also Joe's the kind of board member that any administrator would love to have on their board. Joe, your exceptional leadership, your keen insight, unwavering commitment to justice have left an indelible mark on our district. Our time working together, and this is more the personal side of it, this transcends civic duty. The time that we spend, the average person never sees. We're volunteers. We spend all of our extra time, but after the family and commitments and the shuttlings and every day, we spend late nights, early mornings on this. So you forge, and I was fortunate to forge a friendship over that time on this board with you. Your thoughtful guidance and dedication will be deeply missed on this board. I sincerely hope that you're just taking a little break. I thank you for everything you've done, and I do consider it a travesty that there is no plaque tonight to memorialize and commemorate Joe's time. Ms. Makis, if it's possible, I'd like to say, can he take his name tag with him tonight, if that's okay? Something to remember your time here. Your time on this board is going to be felt by the members here in the administration. And it's a travesty that you don't have something to take with you physically to hang on a wall or put on a desk. So maybe we can give you that name tag tonight. Joe, I have nothing but the deepest appreciation for your dedication, your mind, your even keel, and just quite honestly, your friendship. So thank you.
Mr. Fragiles?
Yeah. Only Joe could get Ms. Makis to agree to taking something worth of value here. That pretty much says it all. So I'm not going to be repetitive. A lot of great things, and I echo the sentiment. I just want to call out the hard work. I mean, you've always been there. It's admirable how much you've really dedicated. I look forward to arguing with Ms. Makis with half as much gusto that you do. And I can only hope that we find you in the trenches in October and we see you on the ballot. So enjoy the rest, and you deserve it.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yes. So, Joe, I want to express my deepest gratitude for the effort and dedication you've shown throughout your tenure on the board. It's not easy, especially when the road is difficult, but you did it with grace and you did it with heart. The strength and spirit you demonstrated will continue to resonate. Thank you for your commitment, for the countless hours you have spent advocating for our community, district, and most of all, our students, and for the positive change you have championed. Your efforts have laid a strong foundation for our future progress. As we move forward and work together, we will build on the momentum you have helped create. I'm honored to have served with you, and thank you. And I too hope to see you on a future ballot.
Joe, where are you? Are you down there? Okay. I'm a special ed person, and you are the finance guy. And I know very little about finance, but I learned so much from you. You truly are a great teacher. And I thank you. And I want you to also know I've been in your situation. And right now, you're not feeling all that good. But you know what? You have to regroup and think for the future, because you are way too valuable to lose. I mean, you have been such a great asset for us, and we will absolutely miss you.
Like everyone said, it's been an honor working alongside you on the board the last 3 years. Your wisdom, your leadership, and your dedication to this district's mission have truly been inspiring, elevated our work, and made me a better board member. You leave behind a big legacy of strong commitment and an impact that we'll all have to strive to carry forward. Thank you again for everything you've contributed.
Thank you. I think, Mr. Banya,
That's all the board
I
members.
think we did all the board
All
members,
the board
right?
members wondering.
Yes.
Yeah, I prepared something as well, but I'd like to speak from my heart, just for a little bit here, like everybody else. Joe, you know, it kind of fell apart. You know, a lot of things happened in February, and I have to say, you were right there with me the whole time. Some people run away from the tidal wave. You really learn a lot about people when they run next to you. You ran next to me. Thank you. I think I've learned more about certain things from Joe than any class, any college course, any experience. It'll make me a better person and is definitely a better superintendent. I appreciate you, and I hope to see you back as well.
I have to stop, isn't it? This has probably been the most uncomfortable I've been in this seat since I got here. And it's been a long meeting. You've all been here since 5:30, so I'll be super quick. I want to make it clear, I am just one person up on this stage. There are 9 trustees, every one of which was in the trench. I was not by myself. There's the faculty, Kent. I know it was not a particularly easy time, but I'm glad that you're still here the way you are. You've come through. I cannot say enough. Ms. Makis is being incredibly humble. I don't win any arguments. But we are, as a district, and I know I said this in April when I sat up at the podium and gave a presentation that talked about the deficit, that the district would be better for this when it's all said and done. We have a lot of work to do. I'm not going anywhere. I will be a member of the community. I'll be a voice for the public, and I'm sure at some point in time I might get wrestled back on a ballot. So thank you all for the kind words. You know, my father would be proud. Thank you.
Is there any other new business to come before the board? Okay, whereas the Board of Education will be discussing matters exempt from public discussion pursuant to NJSA 10:4-12. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education recess to close executive session at this time to discuss contracts and personnel. Be it further resolved that the results of the discussions will be made public by inclusion on the agenda of a subsequent meeting of the Board of Education, or when the reasons for discussing such matters in closed sessions no longer exist. Can I get a motion to adjourn into executive session? Okay, thank you, everyone. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays. Be safe, and we will see everybody back in January. Thank you.